distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's really great to be back in Romania. It's not just great for me because it's coming home and offers me the opportunity to interact with so many friends and partners along my professional life and career. But it's great to be back in Romania with events like this and such an international meeting of bright minds, because Romania has been already for a long time, even before joining NATO, a strong contributor to the goals and the objectives of the alliance, and everyone knows contributions in operations, contributions to the missions and objectives of the alliance. But maybe there's something that has been not so visible. Romania's contribution to the debate, the intellectual debate, the conceptual debate related to NATO's adaptations to the new threats and challenges, that has been fundamental, and that has been recognized on a number of occasions within NATO as well. And this is part of it. So let me thank Aspen Institute, who, together with my colleagues from the NATO Public Diplomacy Division, have been able to put together this conference. And I would say that the theme that is here on screen is one of the most demanding and timely one, because we do need constant, continuous, accurate threat assessment. We do need to do this in concert and in consultations, not just among allies, but in a multi-stakeholder approach to include society. We need to be able to project it, to communicate it, so there's the buy-in of our members of parliament, of our publics, to understand in what kind of world we're living and why we need to invest in our security to assure the way of life, the values, and the prosperity that we all cherish. And I think that from this point of view, through the contributions of Aspen Institute, other think tanks that have been active and present in Romania, German Marshall Fund, RAND, and also some of the brilliant Romanian homegrown think tanks that have already been plugged to the transatlantic community of think tanks. Romania is a strong contributor to this debate. What I will do today is to give you a sense of NATO's evaluations of the current threat landscape, to point on how NATO is responding, and frankly, what are the tasks from Warsaw. President Joanna mentioned that we don't have any finished business. Actually, we're just starting to really go into the depth of the taskings from the Warsaw Summit. And then point towards the end how we should address this immense dynamic of the current threat landscape. Because we have to see this in a sense of constant evolution, and how we can make out of the threat assessment, and then, of course, analysis and action, part of the constant mission of the alliance. So, to be right to the point and short, I would quote our Secretary General when he described concisely the current security environment as follows: the challenges we face, including a more assertive and unpredictable Russia and an arc of instability across the Middle East and North Africa, are indeed daunting. Combined with international terrorism, missile proliferation, and the threat of cyber attacks, they add up to a grave and unpredictable security environment, the most challenging situation NATO has faced since the height of the Cold War. The challenges that we are looking in our area and around the Euro-Atlantic area make it in this, indeed, this environment unpredictable and also dangerous. And in order to structure this analysis, I will focus, of course, on the specificities of the challenges to the east, that to the south, and then refer to the area challenges that we face, while noting that NATO's approach to its security environment is one of 360 degrees, but we need to understand that there are dominant elements in different regions. So to the east, after the war with Georgia in 2008, Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014, seeking to change international borders by force and challenging our post-Cold War vision of a Europe whole and free and at peace. It has been showing an assertiveness that has never been seen before. It has been employing subversion, propaganda, cyber attacks, hybrid attacks, testing the readiness and resolve of European countries and of NATO. A substantial military buildup of Russian forces has been underway in the Crimean Peninsula and in the Black Sea, but also in Kaliningrad and from the Barents Sea to the Mediterranean. This adds up to the active military presence of Russian forces in Syria, and we have pointed out repeatedly that the modernization that has been going underway and the investment in military assets resulting in such capabilities like anti-access area denial capabilities, the so-called A2AD, represent a serious concern for the North Atlantic Alliance, as it means the ability, mainly through military capabilities, air, land and sea, to prevent the free movement with international water and airspace, reinforcement of territorial defense, things that represent significant challenge, especially for the alliance, whose reason of being is that of collective defense, the defense of allied territory and populations. To the south, the collapse of or weakening of nation states across North Africa and Middle East has led to the rise of non-state actors with incredible levels of power and reach. The so-called Islamic State, or Daesh, affirmed its ambition to establish a caliphate beginning in Iraq and Syria. The seizure of territory by this terrorist organization, its message of Islamic fundamentalism and violent jihad, and its reign of terror contributed to escalation of the bloody civil war in Syria and to tremendous destabilization in the area, not least to the biggest migrant and refugees crisis in Europe since the Second World War. In addition to these major challenges that have their dominant, one on the eastern side, the other one on the southern side of the alliance, NATO continues to face long-standing threats coming from domains that are not affiliated to specific geographic regions. The new technologies, cyber attacks, hybrid warfare, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or missile technology, and the spread technology related to ballistic missiles. In these and other areas, we find reasons for increasing concern, especially since they are linked to the other aspects of geographically linked threats that I mentioned before. I think this environment obliges us to change the mindset, to see these area of threats in their complexity, to establish the links between them, and also to view the classical strategic threat analysis with a different lens, to engage more and more in multi-stakeholder approach. And I'm inspired by a conference that I just came from United States, on the west coast of the United States, Stanford University, in the heart of Silicon Valley. And the title was International Security between West Point and West Coast. And the whole point was how much of the thinking inspired by West Point, the strategic thinking of those who are focused on international security, should be linked more, should have more input from the West Coast, from the minds coming from the technology sector, who can be a force multiplier in strategic terms for our task of having better threat assessment, better responses, and quicker positioning in front of these threats. Now, coming to the responses to this threat assessment, let me point that our Warsaw Summit in 2014 was an initial response to these evolving threats. The Alliance quickly embarked on an urgent process of adaptation in a firm but also transparent manner. The need to secure our collective defense led to the Readiness Action Plan and then to the establishment of the NATO spearhead force, the very high readiness force within the NATO response force that has been assembled, and also the number of the NATO response force has been doubled in the years since the Wales Summit. There have been a series of headquarters created in the east of our alliance, including in Romania, and I'm really glad to see here General Uifalanu and Colonel Ticulescu, some great leaders in the Romanian military establishment with whom I had the honor and pleasure to interact and to work here today. Along with the establishment of the so-called NATO force integration units, we have been involved in the deployment of more supplies, equipment that were pre-positioned. There has been removal of so-called bureaucratic hurdles that allowed greater mobility of military personnel and troops and equipment throughout Alliance territory. We also increased the number and scope of our exercises and have speeded up decision-making in order to respond to potential hybrid forms of aggression as seen to the east of our alliance. So these measures have provided a solid foundation for a stronger defense of the deterrence, but this was just the initial response, because at the Warsaw Summit we decided to enhance forward presence of NATO forces in the eastern part of the alliance with 4 battalion-size groups in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. They will ensure that we have sufficient time for the spearhead force and other reinforcements to arrive should any attack occur, and also would send a strong signal that any attack against any single point, country or territory of the alliance is an attack against all and will meet the response from all members of the alliance. In addition, we agreed on a tailored forward presence of our southeastern flank with a land element built around the multinational framework brigade in Romania, based on the offer made by Romania in this sense, and with other forces, this will rely to quickly reinforce those troops on the ground and support training and assurance across the alliance territory. At the same time, we are focused on continuous developing naval cooperation in the Black Sea region, tasks that are important decisions and that will really be the focus of our work in the upcoming weeks and months. And as President Joanna mentioned, end of October there will be a defense ministers meeting in Brussels that will actually offer the first review on the implementation of these taskers. I think it's important to mention in this context also NATO's policy towards Russia. As we can see, NATO's response to this new threat environment and the assertiveness of Russia has been robust and transparent. But let's also mention that these measures have been defensive, proportionate, transparent, and fully in line with our international obligations, something that was mentioned also in the video clip that has been running a couple of minutes before. These efforts are meant to deter aggression, to prevent conflict, not to provoke it. NATO poses no threat to Russia or any other country, and we don't seek any confrontations or any new arms race. But we have an obligation to protect our people and defend our allies, and this is what NATO is doing. Despite our differences with Russia, it remains essential that we engage constructively with it. That's why we are preparing and are pursuing a two-track approach, that is defense combined with dialogue. We do not want to return to business as usual while Russia's aggression against Ukraine continues, but we are ready to address our differences and to prevent tensions from increasing. We are promoting measures to increase military transparency and risk reductions, as well as the behavior in a safe, responsible and predictable manner in international areas of land, air and sea. And frankly, this is why we held 2 meetings this year of the NATO-Russia Council, which were aimed precisely to reduce any tensions or potential misunderstandings through dialogue. To quote Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, Russia is our biggest neighbor and an integral part of European security, so sustaining dialogue is essential. We will therefore continue to seek constructive and meaningful dialogue with Russia, making our intentions clear, dispelling any misunderstanding and reducing the risk of military incidents and or accidents, potential accidents. The Alliance decided at the Warsaw Summit to also protect greater stability beyond our borders to the east and to the south by adapting our strategy on cooperative security, partnerships and capacity building to the new reality of today. To this end, we affirmed our commitment to our partners in the east, like Ukraine, Georgia, the Republic of Moldova, to help them resist outside pressure and advance crucial defense and security reforms. 2 Eastern partners have now dedicated assistance packages from NATO, that is Ukraine, through the comprehensive assistance package decided in Warsaw, and Georgia, the substantial NATO-Georgia package adopted in Wales. When it comes to promoting stability to the south of our alliance, I will point 3 main things. First, our advanced AWACS surveillance aircraft will provide valuable information directly to the global coalition to counter ISIS. And through the coalition, every single NATO ally, from Canada to the UK and from Norway to Turkey, is already involved in this fight against this terrorist organization. Second, we are launching Operation Sea Guardian, a new maritime security operation in the Mediterranean. It's actually a transformation of the former Operation Active Endeavour. Its remit includes counterterrorism and intelligence sharing. It can also work with navies and coast guards in the region to strengthen their ability to fight terrorism and counter human trafficking. And third, NATO is stepping out support for our partners in the Middle East and North Africa to help them better secure their own countries and fight back against violent extremism. NATO is already training hundreds of Iraqi officers in Jordan, and this program will now expand in Iraq itself. NATO stands ready, if requested, to help Libya develop effective defense institutions to stabilize the country and better fight Islamic State. And we will also provide more support for Tunisia, Jordan, and we hope to establish closer international links to regional organizations such as the Gulf Cooperation Council and the African Union. And this third element is about actually empowering those countries to help themselves to deliver on their responsibility to fight from home these threats. Let me turn also to what would be the third and last category of the alliance in terms of threats, the non-conventional one, from cyber attacks to hybrid warfare, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or missile technologies. I would emphasize here that we took steps to enhance our resilience, both within our nations and collectively, by modernizing our capabilities, improving civil preparedness, and ensuring we have the right mix of military and civilian capabilities to meet the evolving security challenges, including hybrid warfare and cyber threats. Regarding hybrid warfare, the Alliance has agreed in Warsaw on a strategy and actionable implementation plans on NATO's role in countering hybrid warfare, which is being implemented in close coordination with the European Union, and that, as you can see, the joint statement by the European Union and NATO at Warsaw has highlighted the imperative of cooperating, especially in these areas of hybrid warfare, cyber defense, and in general in the non-conventional threats area. Now, regarding cyber defense, I'm not going to enter into many details because I will be on a panel that would address a couple of these aspects in detail. I should just mention that there were two main decisions taken in Warsaw. One was the so-called Cyber Defense Pledge, inspired by the Defense Investment Pledge from Warsaw, from the Warsaw Summit, the previous summit, which actually represents a commitment by heads of state and government to invest in strengthening and enhancing national cyber defenses in every single NATO ally as a matter of priority. So to prioritize investment in this domain, since the evolving threat landscape is really steepest in the cyber field. The other big decision was to recognize cyber defense as a domain of operations in which NATO must defend itself as effectively as it does in air, land, and sea, all this by reaffirming NATO's defensive mandate, its respect for international law, and desire to act according to the principle of restraint. At the same time, the Warsaw Summit stated that missile defense can complement the role of other elements of deterrence, as a purely defensive capability without substituting any of the deterrence capabilities of NATO. The threat to NATO populations, territorial and forces posed by the proliferation of ballistic missiles continues to increase, unfortunately, and everyone is aware about tests that are continuing in a number of nations. And missile defense forms part of a broader response to counter it. To come to the conclusion of this presentation, yes, we do have an evaluation of the current landscape, and yes, we have a set of concrete taskings and actions decided at the Warsaw Summit. But to be sure, the threat landscape is not staying still. It's actually one of the most dynamic threat landscape that we have evaluated both historically and in recent times. So for this, we need a concept of constant adaptation. So NATO is focused on developing its extensive capabilities to assess, decide, and respond to this dynamics today. The division that I have the honor and responsibility to lead has been established in 2010 to bring a special focus on strategic analysis and to the emergence of the non-conventional, the emerging threats, starting from the spread of terrorism, cyber defense, energy security, the impact of new technologies upon security, also WND, non-proliferation, and it also manages the program Science for Peace and Security. And the importance of its mandate has been reinforced in this current threat landscape. Another important relevant evolution in our alliance response to current evolving threats is the decision taken by the Warsaw Summit for a new joint intelligence and security division to be established. It will be led by an Assistant Secretary General for Intelligence and Security in charge with NATO's intelligence and security activities while ensuring a better use of existing personnel and resources while maximizing the efficient use of intelligence provided by allies. And while NATO is doing its best to create the best framework of intelligence fusion and awareness across the alliance, I should stress that the input relies on the voluntary contributions of intelligence by the allies. They are the ones who have the assets, and it's not NATO. NATO just has a role of a clearinghouse and also a place where the assessment leads to the debate that generates the policy and decisions that are meant to take us forward. Maintaining the high level of awareness is in fact reflected precisely by the importance granted to intelligence and information, sharing, planning, and this can only continue to increase. I should also mention one of the Secretary General's initiatives to promote more evidence-based analysis and also decision-making. And this is a modern concept that needs an approach to absorb all the relevant data, use the best means to process them, and then feed it into the strategic analysis, which is the main business of NATO. So, all these strands of work point towards the same conclusion. NATO needs a continuous process of adaptation and to become more proactive in assessing and also analyzing the hybrid mix of challenges that we face this will have an impact on the way we also approach training, education, and exercises. And this also will have an impact on another change of mindset, that is to address the multi-stakeholder approach for this increasing needs of dynamic threat assessment. This means partnerships between allies and partner nations, between NATO and international organizations, and also partnership with the think tank community, academia, and the private sector. By the way, in the cyber domain at the Warsaw Summit, NATO has launched a specific NATO industry cyber partnership, the NATO so-called NICP, recognizing that, for example, in this field where the industry holds the infrastructure and also, frankly, is the key holder of the technology trends, such a direct, seamless link is a key for our success. I will end while stressing that, of course, all this comes at a price. As we understood from history, that freedom has never come for free. And we need to really be able to factor in within the perception of our society the kind of world we are living, so that it is clearly understood why we don't need to take security for granted. Be it security inside our nations, and we could see what terrorism can bring to our way of life in any of the places that we pursue our professions, our personal life. This threat can really generate profound impact, and it's better to be proactive and anticipative rather than reactive. So I think we have there's a better case to make to our public's opinions, and I think here the role of think tanks, the role of members of the political establishment, of parliaments are key, because we need to have a buy-in of the members of our society why an investment in security is crucial, and an investment in security is actually an investment in the prosperity, in the development, in the health of our society. And let me also make another point. We speak about this very complex security environment, the most challenging since the Second World War. But the truth is that the world and the transatlantic community has been crossing other challenging periods, and not to refer just to the periods of hot war that had dramatic consequences. I went recently to a debate focused on the current status and future transatlantic relationship, and how this should be influencing the agenda of for example, of the future U.S. administration. And there was an ample recollection, for example, of the 60s in America and in Europe, starting with the Cuban Missile Crisis, with an assassination of a president and a freedom fighter, respectively John Fitzgerald Kennedy or Martin Luther King in the US, Vietnam War, and in Europe, you recall the Prague Spring and the intervention of the Warsaw Pact. So those were testing times as well. So the point is, let's not take the security, the threat environment easy. Let's make it understood to the public. Let's not take it in a, let's say, also too dramatic manner. And I recall, and I will end on this note, I recall a really interesting, important quote by Bill Clinton in his year as a president, when he said, "There's nothing wrong with America." It was about America that cannot be fixed, which was good in America. I think this applies for any nation, for the transatlantic community. I think there's a basis of values, of interests, of networking, of institutional strengths, of capabilities that we should build upon. Because there's nothing wrong in this world that could not be fixed with what we have constructed to be right in this world, but really make use of it and be able to adapt it to the current consequences. And the option is not looking inward. I think it was President Obama who said in New York the other day, I saw it on one of my Twitters, that raising walls, be they physical or mentally, is imprisoning yourself. So no, we need to open ourselves up, especially within the community and values. I think we do have a tremendous asset in our transatlantic relationship with all its components. NATO is one of it. The US-EU dialogue is another one. All this networking of organizations, of people is key, and it can be and it should be the base of responding to this evolving threat landscape in such a way that we are both effective and true to our principles and values. Thank you very much.